talk about newsletters because we have some store owners here, and that's kind of a low-hanging fruit that many of our customers weren't utilizing. So I'm going to just try and explain some basic rules we learned in the last couple of years, how to utilize newsletters as good as possible. Okay, so let's start. The first thing, what constitutes a newsletter, is usually that it has to have some valuable content. And one approach you can have with your newsletter is what I call an altruistic approach, where you don't include any promotions in the emails you send to your customers. That means that you have to provide some real value, some good, some expertise, and this is particularly good for products that have a long sales cycle. For consulting products, for consulting or some services that have a really long sales cycle, you establish yourself as an expert through the, let's say, altruistic approach, which doesn't include any promotions in the email. So it's only valuable content. The second option is that you send promotional emails. That's what most of the shops do. That's actually not a newsletter. In theory, they say if you have 50% of your emails that you send have promotional messages in them, that you're not sending a newsletter anymore. But, well, promotional email also has its problems. If you do it too often, and you send promotions, discounts, it might happen that nobody will want to pay the full price anytime. So the third option is that you, with your newsletters, is content which includes promotions. So you do a percentage, some say 80-20 or something like that, and you send some emails with valuable content and others which are just promotional. Well, the second thing I want to talk about is that newsletter is always about content. And the first thing you need to do is establish a theme. We had our first bigger experience with newsletters was a long time ago, many years ago, we started a newsletter for a translation company. And we wanted to do stuff connected to languages. So we created a funny newsletter that talked about translation errors. They were a really small company, but the newsletter got really popular. People shared it, and they talked a lot about it. They sent some feedback, but not much. And after a couple of months, we figured out that, okay, this newsletter is really popular. How much money are they making off of it? And we figured out they're not making absolutely any money off of it because it was popular with kids. So we changed the concept and we turned it into a newsletter about grammar rules. That newsletter was, if you consider the stats, it was much less popular than the first one, which was funny, but it had pretty good conversion rates. So people didn't open that email, but those who actually opened that email were interested in their product. So even if you have a theme, you have to find a niche in that theme, and that niche has to be tightly connected to your business goals, not just to your website. Of course, you have to know your content. You have to have experts doing it. For smaller shops, that's probably a shop owner. I wouldn't recommend anybody hiring a marketing agency to do that. And of course, keep it short. Third thing is newsletter frequency. I think a couple of days Marcus asked me what we think about newsletter frequency, how often you should send it. I think there's no ideal frequency. If your customers are interested, you can send it every day. If they're not, you don't send it ever. But it's good for yourself to establish a pattern. So you have some things written up front and you can send them because you don't always have time and you say, well, Fridays we're sending this. It's always good to have a pattern. And the third thing is the writing style. Here is where many newsletters go wrong. Of course, you have the sale and promotion type style, the corporate style, and the human approach. This is from the West Branch website. This is kind of a sales and promotions kind of style, which is good if you have promotions. It usually doesn't have the best conversion rates, but it can be good. This is the kind of a corporate style. This never works. This is maybe good if you have to send something to the board of directors or something. It never really works. And this is the human voice. This is what we've been playing with for the last 5 years, so we're trying to create, at least for our services, newsletters that always seem personalized. So we got a lot of calls, we get a lot of feedback, a lot of calls, because people think we just send it to them. The fifth thing you have to do is you have to segment your users that you send your newsletter to. You can segment them either by interest groups, like if you have a perfume shop, you have the buyers of the women's perfumes, you have buyers of the male perfumes, you have the buyers of both. So you should probably segment that. That's one of the most important things. You can segment it by sign-up date, subscriber activity reports, and order frequency. You have many other options too, of course. This was some of the stats, I think MailChimp did or somebody, how good segmentation can actually really help you raise your open rates, your click rates, decrease your abuse reports. But on the other hand, you should be aware of the stats. We'll go through open rates, click-through rates, and subscribe rates. So open rates this is probably the most unreliable stat you have. The case I was talking about in the beginning with the translation agency, with the funny newsletter that had huge open rates, well, we never sold anything through that, so they don't tell you much. People like to confuse opening email with reading email, and opening email with user engagement. You just can't measure user engagement with open rates. So you can compare it only to your own stats you have from previous newsletters. You should never compare it to what they call industry stats, because they're usually always a lie. So as I said, it tells little about engagement. For click-through rates, all the providers offer a different calculation, so you can't really compare them to anything. They're good for testing. If you're testing newsletters, it's really important that you look at their stats, but they tell you nothing about the value of the clicks, so you should always be looking on your return on investment, conversion rates. Improving unsubscribe rates, you should clean your email list regularly. People that don't want to get your email, you shouldn't be sending it to them. You're not going to sell anything to them. Of course, try to segment your users. And if you're changing themes too often, people are usually not getting what they subscribe for. So that's probably the main reason for high unsubscribe rates. Data you can use is feedback. If I go back to the newsletter I was talking in the beginning about the translation agency, we had much less people opening the email, but our feedback went up 10 times when we started providing something useful. Of course, as I said, conversion rates and A/B testing data. The seventh thing, the last one on the list, is testing. We test all newsletters continuously. Nothing ever goes out without having at least a simple testing. So we're trying out with subject lines, writing styles, length of the newsletter, number of links, send times, and segmentation. Also frequency. The basic message of this is really a low-hanging fruit for the shop owners. You can do some pretty decent return on investment if you just take a little time and do some newsletter writing.